Yo guys, what is up? Max for a Diablo 4 video, and today we're going over my Stormclaw Druid setup. Now, in this season, there are some new vampiric powers that not only increase our attack speed a ton, but also give us a massive damage increase to basic skills. And there isn't an item that synergizes quite as well with attack speed and basic skills as the Crone Staff. This item gives us the ability to cast two basic skills at the same time, and it also turns Claw into a Storm skill and allows us to get +9 ranks into Claw, making a basic attack build not only viable but very strong. On this build, we are at the attack speed cap with like 200% attack speed, and we're just raining down crits with lucky hit, and lightning goes everywhere. This build is a little bit more advanced for like an endgame. I wouldn't recommend leveling with this, but today we're going to be going over my guide for one of the coolest builds that I've played, just cranking up attack speed, calling lightning everywhere. This build shreds bosses. It is really fast movement, and it's just a fun build to play, so I hope you guys enjoy the guide. Let's get right into it. So we're going to do an overview of the build, and then we'll get into the gear specifics and the like spirit boons, vampire powers, Paragon Board, so on and so forth. So the things that you need to really pull this build together, one is the Crone Staff. Yes, you can do this build without the Crone Staff, but I just wouldn't recommend it. There's so many good builds on Druid this season. Try this once you get the Crone Staff. Don't do it until, in my opinion. Obviously, you can do whatever you want. But the Crone Staff is the very first big piece of this build, and it is the only required unique for this build. However, I am going to be using some other uniques. The next thing that we're going to be using is the Spirit Power, or the Vampiric Power. For every 5 basic skills you cast, one of your active cooldowns is reduced by 1.5 seconds. I actually don't have this fully leveled. At fully leveled, this is going to be 2 seconds of cooldown for us, so we're going to be increasing our attack speed and getting a ton of cooldown. We are casting multiple basic attacks per second, so this is really, really great for us. We're also pairing that with the Moonrise. This is going to give us basic attack speed, movement speed, and that 160% multiplicative increase to our basic skill damage. And then we're also going to be using the Ravenous Vampiric Power. We have a lucky hit chance to increase our attack speed by 40% of our movement speed. Currently, I have a 51% bonus. This goes way higher. I have more move speed while I'm a werewolf. If I kill an elite, I get like 40% move speed, and all of this updates like actively. So we're getting a ton of attack speed just from this power. It's incredible. And then we're also using Undying. Every time we cast a skill, which counts for your basic skills, we're healing for 3% of our life. You don't even need to make contact with enemies with this. If you're just basic attacking into the air, you're going to be healing. We're doing like multiple basic attacks per second. So this is an absurd amount of healing, and it actually allows us to spec into a ton of damage. And then we're also using Infection. Infection's the one thing that you could like kind of sub out if you wanted to try something else. But I found that this increased my boss damage quite a bit because we're once again attacking so quickly. And this gives us poison explosions just for 70% poison damage. These are constantly hitting on anything that stays alive for more than a second or two, just to increase our damage even more. The last like core must-have piece to this build is the overcharged aspect. This reads that on our lucky hits, we have a 20% chance when dealing lightning damage to overload the target for 3 seconds, causing any direct damage you deal to them to pulse to additional enemies. Now this, once again, we're hitting all the time, so this is constantly up. This actually does quite a bit of damage and scales with our damage to lightning. We're making this crit, and we're hitting enemies with this constantly. This constantly being up is really great because just basic attacks, without all these like little additions that we're adding in terms of infection, in terms of overcharge, basic attacks can be a little bit weaker. They're not core skills. They don't get as much damage scaling as core skills. So we're adding things like this to increase our overall damage. And then we've also got the Spirit Boon for Overload. This is more just added damage to the build, and all of these things together, which normally don't proc that often, when you combine it with something that's attacking very, very quickly with a lot of attack speed, a lot of crit chance, and a lot of lucky hit, we have all of these things proccing all the time, and that's what's allowing us to deal so much damage. So now let's get into gear specifics. Now, your helmet, you actually have a few options. To start, if you're looking to be a little bit more tanky and you don't have a unique, I've used a helmet that looked like this for a very long time, mainly looking for basic skill attack speed, max life, and cooldown are all really great. You can fill out some resistances here, and then the aspect, your basic skills grant you 20% damage reduction. Doesn't matter the like time on this, you're gonna have 100% uptime on it regardless of the time. but a helmet like this is fantastic. And if I'm using like in higher nightmare dungeons, this is what I'll use. Your unique options are a Tempest Roar, which I actually just had dropped for me. Tempest Roar is great for this build. It is absolutely not needed. The helmet that I actually prefer the most on this build is the Godslayer Crown. The Godslayer is a new unique that drops from Uber Duriel, and it gives us damage, crowd control duration, max life, and cooldown, and it reads, when you stun, freeze, or immobilize an elite enemy or damage a boss, it pulls in nearby enemies. You deal up to 60% increased damage to them. That's all the enemies that you pull in the elite or boss for 3 seconds. When this procs, the big issue with their like basic attack build is it doesn't have a lot of AoE. Skills like Tornado can cover a whole screen. Skills like Lightning Storm can cover a whole screen. Pulverize with its Shockwave can cover a whole screen. We are just basic attacking, and so we don't have that much range, and so clear speed can be a little bit slower on this build for like other builds, just one-shotting whole screens of things. And so being able to constantly pull in enemies, group them, and then hit them with all that lightning damage is really strong. So that is why I like using the Godslayer. And Stormstrike has a 15% chance to immobilize, which when we're attacking multiple times a second with it is actually proccing all the time. So those elites, if they're not getting killed before, they're going to group up, and then you get that damage increase with the Godslayer. Next up for our chest piece, I am using the Mad Wolf's Glee. Mad Wolf's Glee gives us more movement speed. Movement speed translates to attack speed. It gives us damage. It gives us max life. It gives us damage reduction from poison enemies. Everything's going to be poisoned. And it also gives us plus ranks into Werewolf. You could use another defensive chest piece. I currently don't have more than like 2 or 3 glyphs level 15. So I'm not like pushing high nightmares right now. What I'm doing is just focusing on damage. This season is all about boss killing. So for me, right now, my priority is just squeaking out as much damage as possible, and the Mad Wolf's Glee is really great for that. If you don't have something like this and you want to go for higher Nightmare Dungeon pushes, look for like a chest piece that's got quad damage reduction is really nice. For the gloves, the biggest priority is attack speed, crit chance, and lucky hit chance. Attack speed, crit chance, lucky hit are going to be staples of this build, and then whatever rolls after that is whatever. I have lightning critical strike chance, and I didn't actually roll crit chance on this out of reroll resources, so I have crit chance against injured enemies, but attack, lucky hit, and crit chance are staples. If you can get gloves with all 3 of those, you're good to go. And then I'm rocking the Earth and Might key passive, also applies to your storm skills. When I get to our skill tree, I'll talk about why I'm using Earth and Might and not Nature's Fury, because I did a day of testing on Nature's Fury and a day of testing on Earth and Might, and I do think Earth and Might is the play, even though on paper Nature's Fury is also really good, and you can play both, but I do think Earth and Might is the better play here. On our pants, I'm using triple damage reduction and armor while in werebear form. Armor while in werebear form is just left over from my pulverized build, but as much survivability on your pants as you can get. And then I'm also rocking the Disobedience. We gain this armor after we deal any form of damage. We're dealing so much damage, the Disobedience is constantly max stacked on this build. And then I've got the Wind Striker boots, movement speed after killing an elite. All of these translate to attack speed with this build. And then armor while in werewolf form is fantastic. And then any resistances. These are pretty god tier boots. The only thing that I would change is probably have more evades. However, I do have the evades grant movement speed. If I evade, that actually increases my attack speed, so those are really nice. And then our critical chance or critical strikes grant us more move speed. All that move speed, once again, translates to more attack speed. We're overcapped on like attack speed on this build. We have like 200% attack speed. It's crazy. And then for our weapon, Crone Staff, really the only option with basic skill damage gems. For the amulet, I also have a pretty great one. I got damage, werewolf skill damage, cooldown reduction, and ranks of envenom. You could get movement on your amulet, which would be really nice, but ranks of envenom seems to be the best kind of passive that you could go with. It's still a massive damage increase, and then I'm using the aspect to increase my basic skill attack speed. If you wanted to move this, you could use you could swap something like the Edge Masters to your amulet for another like 10% more damage if you want to see a bit higher numbers. But for me, so far, it just feels the best to have as much attack speed as possible, so that even though I'm lacking a bit on my gear, like for example, I only have 22% crit chance, and I only have like 13% lucky hit chance, but because I'm attacking so often, I can kind of make up for those lower stats. And then on your rings, the God Roll ring is crit chance, lucky hit chance, damage to close, and damage to distant. Even though we're not ever really going to be getting the damage to distant bonus, I think it's worth to try to get crit chance, lucky hit, damage to distant, damage to close. Obviously, if you don't want to get damage distant, you don't have to. But they reworked this node. Thunderstruck storm skills deal it increased equal to 30% of your damage versus close and your damage versus distant bonuses. And so all of those things are additive. No matter anything that you get on your ring is additive. However, if you get damage to distant, you can turn it into a multiplicative damage increase. And so I just think even though distant doesn't sound that great with this build, it'll turn into a multiplier that will make it more worth and you'll just deal more damage. And so this ring's pretty solid. Crit chance, crit damage, damage to close, damage to distant. This ring's okay. I've got crit chance, lucky hit, lightning crit damage, and damage to crowd controlled enemies. Getting that close and distant is really, really nice though. For our spirit boons, we're going to be using wariness. This is just kind of like the default thing for druids. 10% reduced damage from elites. I've got swooping attacks for even more attack speed. We get a lot of attack speed on this build. We're using Calamity to extend the duration of our ultimate skills. I am using Cataclysm. This does a bunch of damage, and it's got really high lucky hit chance, 95% lucky hit chance, and it's going to be constantly up. I've had times while I'm doing this build where Cataclysm is already refunded while it's currently up because of Calm Before the Storm. When we lucky hit, we can reduce the cooldown. Plus, our basic attacks reduce the cooldown of our skills. So you can have 100% uptime on this, which is insane. And then Overload gives us a little bit extra damage, which is just really nice to have. For our skill tree, we've got Claw, and making sure that Claw can have the chance to attack twice. That's a lot more damage when it hits twice, and we don't need it to poison because we're going to be grabbing the Werewolf node, where any of our Werewolf crits will poison enemies. And then we're using Storm Strike. Now, I've currently got Fierce Storm Strike on. Storm Strike is a 50% chance to make enemies vulnerable for 3 seconds. And as I was recording this build video for you guys, I realized that because we're basic attacking all the time, we actually don't need to run the exploit glyph on this build at all. And so I do have that just because, as you'll see, I don't have like any of my glyphs leveled. My Fang and Claw is level 6. My Spirit glyph is level 9. So I've still got it on just because it's one of my only leveled glyphs. You could really just do so much more damage than I'm doing with this build if you grind out those glyph levels. But you could use the exploit glyph and actually run Wild Storm Strike for the chain to 2 additional targets. I think this is just better, and then I'm actually in the like Paragon board that I'm going to link for this build. I actually will take out the exploit glyph because it's just not needed. We can get some bigger bonuses, vulnerable damage. As long as the enemy is vulnerable, we're going to get the most damage out of vulnerable. We don't need more damage increases to vulnerable enemies. We certainly don't need another source of vulnerable because Storm Strike is going to be fantastic. Then moving on, we're not grabbing any core skills. We're going to grab Predatory Instinct for more crit chance. Digitigrade Gate. This is going to give us more move speed. More move speed feels good, and it's more attack speed. Then we're grabbing a bunch of defensive skills. There's not many other things that we can like really benefit from with this build. So we're grabbing Earth and Bulwark. Earth and Bulwark is going to be our source of Unstoppable. Do not click this button unless you get Unstopped, because right now with the build that I have set up, it's our only source of Unstoppable, and it's going to give us a barrier. So this is really nice. Just make sure that you're not constantly proccing this. We've got Cyclone Armor, which is going to give us more damage reduction, and we've got Vigilance. We've got 3 defensive skills, so we're getting a ton of damage reduction just from constantly proccing this. More damage reduction here, and then Blood Howl gives us more attack speed, which is really nice. I originally was using Poison Creeper with the crit chance, but when I was using that, I was using it with Nature's Fury, and that felt pretty nice. I'll talk about why I'm not using Nature's Fury in a second here. But no companion skills. Then we come down here, Hurricane. Enemies deal less damage when they're affected by Hurricane. I grabbed all of these lightning things. We don't need Endless Tempest just because we have really low cooldowns. But Electric Shock is going to allow us to deal more lightning damage to enemies. Charged Atmosphere calls these lightning bolts down. These lightning bolts usually hit for like tiny bits of damage. However, they just added a glyph that increases their damage by like 400%. So these things are actually doing some pretty good damage right now. So Charged Atmosphere is a good pickup, and Bad Omen. Lucky Hit, we have a 30% chance when dealing damage to vulnerable, immobilized, or stunned enemies to call down those lightning bolts. Then we've got our Neurotungsten. Poison enemies are slowed, mainly here for Envenom, so that we get that damage, crit damage against poison enemies and Toxic Claws whenever we crit with our werewolf skills. that are going to get poisoned, so this synergizes really well. We're grabbing Defiance. Our nature magic skills deal 12% increased damage to elites. Just so we're clear, when I hover over Claw, Claw is a basic skill. It's also a shape-shifting skill. It's also a nature magic skill. It's also a storm skill, and it's a werewolf skill. This is getting basically all the tags, and so we can scale it where we normally couldn't with Defiance, which is really nice. And then we're using Cataclysm. Now for like the big topic of why am I using Earth and Might? Why am I not using Nature's Fury? So Nature's Fury is really nice with this build. You can pair it with the symbiotic aspect to basically have 0 cooldowns. And you can also use Earth Spike and then you're triple casting basic skills because all of your casts of Storm Strike and Claw will cast Earth Spike. And that was really cool. And it was doing pretty good damage. However, with my like kind of relatively budget gear, just right now I don't have a lot of crit chance. I don't have a lot of lucky hit, and I was noticing that I just wasn't critting all that often, and I wasn't doing as much damage as I knew that we could be getting. And then I tried out Earth and Might, and this is a lucky hit chance to give us guaranteed crits. And because we're hitting so often, we've got all these lightning effects. Making all of those things guaranteed crits just turns into so much extra damage for this build where we're not really worried about survivability. We're just trying to squeak as much damage out. And I think Earth and Might is the best possible way to squeak out more damage. Obviously, we do not care about the Spirit Restore, but getting guaranteed critical strikes with the changes to crits, anytime we crit, we're just going to deal 50% more multiplicative damage. And so you could obviously go either, but I do think Earth and Might is the higher damage option. For my Paragon board, I'm focused on a lot of damage. I didn't prioritize survivability as much on this build because, honestly, when you're casting like 5 basic skills a second with all of our healing and our CC, we have pretty good survivability. As long as something doesn't one-shot you, you're literally unkillable, which is pretty crazy. And then if you want to like push higher nightmares, you can have the option to go for some more armor and some more survivability. But right now, in my first board, I have the exploit glyph. This will change on my like linked Paragon board, just because I think we can get away without using exploit. But exploit first board. Then we're going into the second board, which is going to be the Thunderstruck board. Grab this early. Grab all of these crit damage increases, which are really nice for us because we're guaranteed critting. In our first thing, I've got Territorial. Just to give you an example, my Territorial glyph is level 1. It is. I'm using a level 1 glyph at level 100. I just blasted through the Domhain tunnel, so I haven't really done that much nightmare dungeons, but you could deal so much extra damage. Territorial is going to give us that damage reduction from close and increased damage to close targets. If I'm not mistaken, this increased damage to close targets should directly feed into Thunderstruck, so I'm missing a ton of damage by having this as level 1. So yeah, bit of my bad, but that's where we're going to put that. Then we're going to come up through this board and go into the inner beast board. Obviously, we don't care about our like spirit costs. We're going to put the electrocution glyph. This is the new glyph of this season. It's going to give us 200 right now. Mine is level 13. It's giving me 232% lightning bolt damage. And more importantly, enemies that get damaged by my lightning bolts are going to take 20% increased damage. That's a massive multiplier. Then we're snaking over to the right from this board over to the constricting tendrils board. Here we can pick up nature's magic skill damage, which is really nice. More max health. Max health is really great on this build because we're healing based off of a percentage of our health every second because we're basic attacking. And so when I'm in like a werewolf, we're hitting around like 15k life, which is just, it's very comfy. But then we go up here. Gotta fill out this intelligence right now, but the more damage to elites, more nature magic skill damage. I originally grabbed Heightened Malice, which is why the board looks like this. And then I've just decided against it. I don't think it's quite up often enough. And then without it, we can grab some more damage. So we're going from the right down here to the Heightened Malice board, which we're grabbing more lightning damage, and then more damage to poison enemies, more damage reduction from poison enemies, grabbing this as well, the more damage to poison enemies, more damage to elites, and then coming down here to grab the Fang and Claw, which also, once again, is the level 6 glyphs. I like once these things are a higher level, I'll be able to like rearrange them a bit better. But like, for example, a lot of glyphs that I wanted to put here can't fit here because of the like lack of dexterity nodes. There just isn't enough to like fully fill out something. So right now I've got the Fang and Claw here, and we're grabbing more werewolf skill damage and more healing received, more willpower, as well as more werewolf skill damage. Guys, that is going to do it for the build video. I know it was a bit scuffed having like level 1 glyphs and stuff, but I'm trying to churn out as many builds and as much content as I can for this season. And I think this is a build that if you wanted to get into it, really like the sky is the limit for it. You could really push this build into the like Nightmare 100s, no problem. Killing Uber bosses, no problem. There's just so much damage potential with this build, and I rate it really, really highly. I will catch y'all in the next one. Make sure to check out the linked thing for the updated like Paragon board, and also if I make any changes to the build, all of the changes will go live on there. I can't obviously like live update a YouTube video. So yeah, guys, I will catch y'all in the next one. Take care. Peace.